Hey everyone, welcome to the show.
Great to be here.
Imagine generations of families placing just this unwavering trust in a company,
Yeah,
only to discover that behind that comforting image lay, well, a really disturbing pattern of concealed risks and prioritized profits.
that's quite a hook, isn't it? What's fascinating right from the start is that sheer betrayal of trust.
Exact.
For so many people, Johnson & Johnson wasn't just, a corporation. It was sort of woven into the fabric of daily life.
Like mother and medicine.
Right. A symbol of reliability, baby care, medicine, everything. And that's why this book, No More Tears, The Dark Secrets of Johnson & Johnson by Gardiner Harris. Well, it hits hard.
It's investigative journalism, right?
Yeah.
Really digging deep.
Oh, absolutely. Impactful stuff. A very compelling read.
Yeah, it really is. This book takes us on a deep dive into the history of this iconic company. And it reveals this long series of instances where decisions allegedly favored financial gain.
Sometimes with really serious consequences for consumers, it seems.
Yeah. We're talking controversies spanning decades.
Yeah.
And across a whole range of their products.
And the author meticulously pieces together this narrative,
Yeah.
suggesting these weren't just isolated incidents.
Right, not just one-offs.
No, more indicative of perhaps a broader corporate culture. It really makes you, the listener, question how these things can persist inside such a well-regarded company.
What I particularly appreciated about it, and no spoilers here, was just the sheer depth of the investigation.
The research.
Yeah, Harris clearly did an incredible amount of work uncovering internal documents, testimonies.
It takes serious effort.
It really does. And it's the way he connects these seemingly separate events across time that really stood out. It reveals this consistent pattern of behavior.
And that kind of rigorous research is just essential, isn't it? For understanding the complexities of a huge corporation with such a long history.
Totally.
It lets us get beyond the surface, Look at the internal workings, the decisions that led to these controversies.
On the other hand, though, what I found maybe disheartening, again, not getting into specifics yet, was just the sheer volume of instances where it really looked like financial interest just took precedence over, ethical considerations.
That's a heavy theme.
It is. It's a lot to process, and it can leave you feeling a bit uneasy, frankly, about corporate responsibility.
Understandable.
Also, I was kind of left feeling that, even after all that digging. Some crucial questions about accountability, they still feel a bit elusive.
That sense of ambiguity, around accountability. That's often a challenge in these kinds of deep dives, isn't it?
I guess so.
I mean, large corporate structures can sometimes obscure responsibility, maybe even intentionally. Makes it hard to pinpoint who made the final call, even with documents.
Right. So overall, I give No More Tears a strong 4 out of 5 stars.
Solid rating.
Yeah, I think it's a really significant piece of work for anyone who wants to understand, the potential dark side of major corporations, especially in healthcare.
And the importance of ethics in business.
Definitely. A strong ethical compass.
So as you get into the book, one of the early things that sort of sets the stage, this tension between profit and ethics.
Okay.
It involves the company's initial reluctance, apparently, to widely share patents for HIV/AIDS meds.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, with the UN program aimed at saving lives in Africa. It raises that huge question, right? Global health crisis versus proprietary interests. How do you balance that?
That's a tough one right off the bat. Okay, so let's talk about that brand image, J&J's image.
Crucial.
The book really highlights how vital that perception of trust was. Yeah. Especially with the baby products.
The golden egg.
Yes. You remember that bit? The 2008 internal slide deck calling the Johnsons' names linked to the mother-infant bond their golden egg.
Creating this almost unbreakable emotional bond.
Exactly.
And that emotional connection, it's incredibly powerful in marketing, isn't it?
Totally bypasses rational thought sometimes.
Right. It taps into fundamental feelings. Security, well-being, especially with babies. This emotional trust, as they called it, gave them a huge edge over competitors who maybe just relied on rational trust, like product effectiveness.
And they deliberately built that image from way back.
Pioneers, really.
The book talks about them mass-producing sterile surgical dressings, supplying the Army and Navy during the Spanish-American War.
That Fred Kilmer quote.
Oh, yeah. Offering millions of pounds of cotton, millions of yards of gauze, plasters enough to encircle the earth to the nation.
It really paints a picture, doesn't it? A company deeply tied to American values, public service.
It does.
And that early history, is so important for understanding why their positive reputation lasted so long.
Right, resilience.
They positioned themselves as partners. Public health, national efforts, built up this deep well of goodwill they could draw on for decades.
Even when, as the book suggests, internal practices maybe didn't always match that image.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which brings us to where the narrative takes that sharp turn.
Yeah, the clash between the image and the internal stuff.
And one of the first big areas, one of the most significant, centers around asbestos and their talc-based baby powder.
Right, the talc issue.
The timeline the book lays out around this alleged asbestos contamination is, well, it's deeply concerning.
What does it say?
It presents evidence suggesting that as early as the 1970s, internal documents, scientific findings, pointed to asbestos in the talc.
70s. Wow.
Yeah. And, for everyone listening, it's crucial to understand asbestos is a known carcinogen.
Absolutely. Deadly stuff.
So finding it in baby powder, that raises huge health questions. The book even mentions a 71 study, Tenovis Cancer Research Institute, reportedly found talc particles deep inside ovarian tumors, hinting at a potential link between talc use and cancer.
And it wasn't like this was totally unknown inside J&J itself.
Apparently not. The book details internal memos, one from a company scientist in 71, raising the possibility of litigation.
Litigation because of talc.
Potential links between their powder formulas and pulmonary disease. So this wasn't some sudden crisis that blindsided them.
No, there were internal warnings, discussions happening decades before it all blew up publicly.
Exactly. And here's a crucial point the book highlights. J&J allegedly chose not to publicly disclose findings suggesting asbestos contamination.
So they kept it quiet.
Reportedly, yes. And even discouraged researchers from making these findings public.
Wow.
What that reveals, and this is a key insight for you listening, is how long-standing internal knowledge of a potential harm can maybe be suppressed, especially when a product is so tied to the brand, to profits.
It suggests it wasn't just one bad decision, maybe.
It suggests a potential systemic bias, perhaps,
Yeah.
against acknowledging negative findings that could hurt a core product.
The story gets even twistier with researchers like Dr. Arthur Langer.
Right, the microscopist. Interesting story. Early in his career, he accidentally grew talc, trying to grow asbestos in the lab. Shows how similar they are, minerally speaking. Later, working with Dr. Irving Selikoff, a huge name in asbestos research.
Right, Selikoff. Groundbreaking work.
Their findings about potential asbestos in talc were reportedly met with resistance from J&J.
Resistance, how?
Well, Selikoff's work showed the dangers of even minimal asbestos exposure. He and Langer apparently share their concerns about talc with New York City's top environmental official back in '71.
Leading to a public announcement.
Yeah, about potential asbestos in cosmetic talc. So the alarm bells were ringing in parts of the scientific community, even if the companies seemed to be downplaying it.
The book also goes into how J&J responded to these pressures, right? Like with the FDA.
There's mention of them telling FDA officials their talc had only minor amounts of asbestos, less than 1%.
But wait, wasn't their public stance that it was completely asbestos-free?
Exactly. That discrepancy. Internal communications versus public statements. It's a recurring theme, raising big questions about transparency.
Yeah, it really is.
That inconsistency is right at the heart of the ethical concerns, isn't it?
Seems like it.
I mean, maybe early on, some executives genuinely believed the levels were negligible. That's conceivable.
Okay.
But the continued denial, the alleged suppression of research as more evidence came out, that gets harder and harder to square with that carefully built image of trustworthiness.
And didn't someone eventually admit in court that earlier statements were false?
Yes. The later acknowledgement and testimony that previous sworn statements about bogey powder never containing asbestos were false. That's a huge turning point in the story.
It's quite striking, too, that even when other companies started switching to cornstarch baby powders, this is like late 80s, J&J stuck with talc. By then, everyone knew asbestos was dangerous. The idea of it possibly being in baby powder just seems unthinkable.
It does.
Why did they persist? Did the book offer any reasons?
It suggests there's no single simple answer, but it points to maybe deeply ingrained brand loyalty. The company's long-held belief that their talc product was just superior. It speaks to how hard it can be for huge corporations to change course, even when evidence is mounting.
Okay, so moving beyond baby powder, the book covers other major scandals too, right?
Oh yeah, Risperdal, the antipsychotic drug, medical devices like the ProLift vaginal mesh, Pinnacle hip implants.
And does it suggest a similar pattern?
It seems to. Aggressive marketing, allegedly downplaying risks, a focus on profit, that narrative seems to repeat.
Tell me about Risperdal. What were the issues there?
The narrative around Risperdal is particularly troubling. The book presents allegations that J&J marketed it for uses not approved by the FDA.
Off-label marketing.
Exactly, promoting a drug for something it wasn't officially approved for, which carries big risks because the safety and effectiveness for those uses haven't been fully checked out.
And who are they marketing it to off-label?
The book suggests this included marketing to elderly patients with dementia and also to children with behavioral issues.
Oh, wow. Vulnerable groups.
Yes, and that these efforts allegedly involved maybe inappropriate tactics like incentivizing doctors to prescribe it.
And the consequences. Were there side effects?
Yes. As detailed in the book, they were significant. Risperdal was shown to have serious side effects, especially in those groups.
Like what?
Reports of increased risk of strokes, even death, in elderly patients with dementia, and issues like major weight gain and gynecomastia, breast development in young boys taking the drug.
That's awful. And the ProLift vaginal mesh, what was the story there?
Another concerning picture. The book describes how the company apparently kept marketing the mesh despite early reports from surgeons about really serious complications.
Like the mesh eroding.
Exactly. Erosion into surrounding tissues. The fact that, at one medical conference, a high percentage of surgeons reportedly raised their hands when asked if they'd had to surgically manage mesh erosion
Yeah.
gives you a sense of the potential scale of the problem.
That's alarming. And the hip implants. Pinnacle.
Pinnacle metal-on-metal hips, yeah. The book details how an engineer reportedly spotted a potential design flaw right before they submitted it to the FDA.
But they launched it anyway.
Allegedly, yes. The issue was friction between the metal parts could release metal debris into patients' bodies,
Leading to.
potentially devastating health problems, tissue damage, needing revision surgeries,
Yeah.
just awful outcomes for some patients.
And was this type of metal-on-metal implant known to have problems before?
That's what's striking. The book reports comparisons to earlier metal-on-metal devices that had already failed significantly in the market.
Did the FDA raise flags?
Apparently, yes. The FDA reportedly raised concerns about the Pinnacle design, but J&J allegedly downplayed them and kept marketing it aggressively.
It becomes almost overwhelming, doesn't it? The sheer number of different product lines and these repeated allegations, prioritizing profits over consumer well-being. The book really paints a picture of a company that maybe strayed pretty far from that original trusted image.
And it's important for listeners to understand the book also touches on the complexities of the whole regulatory landscape.
The FDA's role.
Yeah, the relationship between the FDA and these industries is multifaceted. The book raises questions about how effective oversight really is, or was in certain cases.
Didn't the book also mention their role in the opioid crisis?
Briefly, yes, through a subsidiary that became a major supplier of opioid ingredients.
So not just Purdue Pharma.
Right. While Purdue and OxyContin get most of the attention, the book points out J&J's role in supplying raw materials and allegedly mirroring some of Purdue's aggressive marketing tactics.
It just shows how interconnected it all is.
Absolutely. The opioid crisis wasn't just one company, it was a whole network. Manufacturers, distributors. J&J's position as a key supplier put them right in that ecosystem.
Even their attempt at a COVID vaccine, which seemed like a chance to maybe rebuild some trust.
Yeah.
That was hit by manufacturing problems and safety concerns, too, as the book details. It almost feels like a continuation of past issues with ensuring safety and reliability.
That's a really sobering point, isn't it? Even in a global health crisis where you'd think a trusted healthcare company could shine, the book suggests those past patterns and challenges might have still been influential.
It truly makes you reconsider that initial image, doesn't it? J&J as this universally benevolent corporation.
Completely.
The book presents a really compelling case for a much more complex and, yeah, sometimes troubling reality, where the pursuit of profit allegedly came at a significant cost. Public health, consumer trust.
And that is the key takeaway, I think, for you, the listener. This deep dive into J&J's history, as laid out in No More Tears, it just raises fundamental questions.
About corporate responsibility.
Yeah, and about regulatory oversight, and just the very nature of the trust we place in these huge corporations that directly impact our health, our well-being.
Absolutely critical questions. So if this exploration into the dark secrets of Johnson & Johnson has intrigued you.
Which it probably has.
Yeah. Please be sure to like and subscribe. You can find a link to buy No More Tears, The Dark Secrets of Johnson & Johnson on Amazon right in the description below.
And we really appreciate you joining us for this important and, frankly, thought-provoking discussion.
Would love to hear your thoughts, too. What was the most surprising or maybe impactful revelation for you in this deep dive?
Yeah, let us know.
Share your insights in the comments below, and please, feel free to share this with anyone who you think would find it valuable. Let's keep this crucial conversation going.
Definitely. Your comments, your shares, they really help broaden the discussion and bring these important issues to more people.
So here's a final thought. Knowing what we've uncovered today, what does it make you reconsider about the trust we place in major corporations, particularly those that have such a direct impact on our health?
Something to chew on.
It's definitely something to keep in mind. Thanks for listening, everyone.